Thank you, everybody, for joining the Organic Open House. My name is Mike Rassweiler from NorthSlope Farm, and I'm the current president of the Board of Trustees for NOFA, New Jersey. And I'm glad to be hosting the conversation today. If you think about agriculture in New Jersey, you are probably aware that farmland is threatened by development, and farmers are having a hard time making a profit. The Organic Open House is a place for people who care about agriculture and organic principles to talk about the challenges and opportunities we face. In New Jersey, the people have voted to approve a new agricultural crop that has the potential to open up great new opportunities. But as those of us who are interested in exploring sun-grown cannabis seek to invest, we have found profound challenges in the form of unjustified prohibitions and unchallenged misconceptions. Today, we will get to hear from farmers who want their initiatives to be supported, not prohibited. In particular, we're looking at prohibitions against sun-grown cannabis on preserved farmland. First, we'll hear from Smrita Choubey of Veda Farms, then Sherry Dudas of Chesterfield Organic Orchards. Then we'll open up to discussion. This topic has many complicated issues that threaten its effective exploration. So we'll try to keep it simple, as we've found that a simple misconception may be what is hurting farmers' potential to move forward with investment, research, and ultimately access to new markets. So we'll get started with Smrita. And if you have any questions, please just go ahead and put them in the chat. Thanks.
So thank you so much, Mike, and to the entire NOFA organization for allowing me this opportunity to share a bit more about myself and our agricultural business. So as Mike mentioned, my name is Smrita Choubey. I'm the founder of Veda Farms. And to give you a little bit of background on myself, I'm an Indian American. I have spent my entire life in New Jersey. I am a fifth generation member of an agricultural family. We've had farmland in India since the 1800s, still have it to this day, and have really been raised with the Eastern medicine philosophies of yoga, Ayurveda, and meditation. So I'm not a farmer by profession and by trade. I studied economics and finance. I started my career in healthcare investment banking at JP Morgan. And after doing thousands of hours of math on the American healthcare system, I became very disillusioned with the way things are structured here. And conversely, I became very, very passionate about holistic medicine and the power of herbs and the power of preventative medicine. So about 3 years ago, I left my finance career in 2019 to a full-time focus on starting Veda Farms. And our intention is to really combine the worlds of agriculture and wellness to start a new conversation around what holistic wellness really means. So Veda Farms is a company that is rooted in Ayurveda. For anyone who's not familiar with that, Ayurveda is the sister science of yoga. It's the world's oldest medical science, and it uses a combination of herbs, healthy, locally grown, seasonal diets, exercise, meditation, mindfulness in order to proactively create health. So we think that this is really the opposite of what mainstream healthcare has become in our modern times, which is really about trying to maximize profit, trying to get people on prescription drugs for recurring revenue, which are great for the industry and great for investors, but not so good for the American people. So I became very, very passionate about starting this company that not only has a farm, but also is creating personalized holistic medicine. So we're in the process of purchasing a farm. And I'm very excited about this personally. As I mentioned, my family's had farmland since the 1800s, but in Indian culture, women don't inherit farmland. So I'm on my own to start my own legacy. So at the moment, we're in contract to purchase a 254-acre preserved farm I've known from the beginning that farmland preservation has its own challenges, but I actually purposely wanted to take on this challenge because I felt so strongly that everything that I'm doing fully complies with farmland preservation law. And in fact, because we are focused on regenerative farming, we think that we're going above and beyond what farmland preservation is actually requiring, above and beyond what organic certifications are requiring. And we're really just taking it to the next level. So I didn't want to get scared away by the farmland preservation thing. In fact, I wanted to really become an example of how you can set up a sustainable business while complying with farmland preservation law. So as it relates to cannabis, cannabis is something that's been part of Ayurvedic medicine for thousands of years. And in the East, what we have known is, yes, you can use cannabis recreationally, and you can also use it medicinally. Our ancient texts have over 300 different formulas using cannabis. And medicinal cannabis is actually prepared very differently from recreational cannabis in Ayurvedic tradition. There's specific formulation technologies that they use to actually process out the THC. They always formulate it in polyherbal blends. So 10 to 12 other herbs were almost always used with cannabis when created, when being used medicinally. So the whole purpose of our farm is to grow 10 to 12 different medicinal herbs, which will be used in a variety of different Ayurvedic holistic medicine solutions. So cannabis is one of the herbs we want to grow. But in the process of working on this entire business model, and it's not been an easy process for me. I have been looking for land since 2018. Nothing has been easy about the process. I've seen many different farms that I loved and fell in love with that have tried to pursue and have not worked out for one reason or another. But the current farm that we have seems to be perfect for us and for a multitude of different reasons. However, in that process, I'm realizing that there are some serious roadblocks against cultivating cannabis on preserved farmland. And that is really the reason why I wanted to speak to you all today, just to kind of relay back everything that I've found in my homework process, and also to connect with other farmers who are perhaps facing the same issue, because this really isn't just about Veda farms. This has implications for every single preserved farmland in the state of New Jersey. So the first thing I want to say is there is a broad misconception out there that cannabis has to be grown in these indoor warehouses. So I think that there is a certain level of education that the onus really lies on us to carry out, which is that thousands of years of history have gone into cannabis cultivation outdoors like any other crop in the world. So it really does not need this like heavy industrial infrastructure. In fact, the industrial infrastructure was a construct of prohibition. Because for the last many decades it was illegal, people started growing inside simply because you were going to go to jail if you were caught growing it. So now that it has become legal, I really think that the indoor warehouses should go by the way of the dinosaur, because they're no longer necessary. They're also energy intensive in a very, very intense way. So the carbon emissions are just unheard of. I've heard of indoor warehouses spending up to $100,000 per month on electricity alone. So think of what we're doing to the environment. So we really believe that Sun Grown Cannabis has, major environmental benefits beyond the energy intensivity. Cannabis is one of the most efficient plants in terms of sequestering carbon. So this is actually, when grown regeneratively, this can actually benefit our environments quite a bit in terms of sequestering carbon, improving soil health, improving air quality, enhancing biodiversity, so on and so forth. So firstly, I believe that there's some education to be done. What I've found is many municipalities had no idea that you can even grow it outside. It seems to them like a novel idea, like, whoa, what do you mean? You can grow it outside? So I think, farmers really need to have a seat at the table at this moment to be like, yeah, we can grow it inside. Absolutely. The key things to keep in mind are simply that it needs to be secured. And what we see in the state of New Jersey is that the Cannabis Regulatory Commission has actually created regulations that are very favorable to farmers. But what we're finding right now is a big back and forth of he said, she said, whereby the SADC is taking a position that the CRC has banned preserved farmland from growing cannabis. And the CRC is saying the opposite. The CRC is saying we have allowed farmers, and the SADC is now telling us that preserved farmers aren't allowed. Who are we to tell ag what they can do with their farmers? So what I'm hearing is a big just loggerheads of each side just blaming the other side. And I do have a very well-connected policy advisor that I've been working with for the past year plus. And to be fairly honest, my Wall Street background really taught me that the way these things work is really that you have a lobbyist, and then they go represent your interests while the regulations are being made. And without that, it's kind of tough because you're left out of the conversation. So one of the first things I did when I started this company is think about, what type of lobbyist do I want to hire? And I felt like that was money really well spent, even though I am a startup. So thanks to my my policy advisor, who is fairly well connected within the cannabis world, and actually has had many one-on-one discussions with the CRC executive director, Jeff Brown. So what we found is that Jeff Brown and the CRC more generally, they're actually very, very supportive of farmers taking part in the cannabis industry. They feel that, well, first of all, 100% of the medical marijuana players are all 100% indoor. So farm grown cannabis is not happening right now in New Jersey, which is kind of a travesty given that it's the garden state. Additionally, most of the people applying for the recreational market likewise are looking to grow in indoor warehouses. At best, they're putting up non-agricultural big glass greenhouses that are basically warehouses, but with a glass roof. So again, that's not agriculture. They have very, very thick cement floors. Most of them are growing hydroponically. Like, that's not farming. So from the philosophical idea I got from the CRC is that they're actually very favorable to the idea of a craft cannabis industry being born in the garden state. And this is also because think of the political pressure they're under. Our neighboring state of New York just literally gave every single cannabis cultivation license to farmers. All of their recreational license, over 200 of them this year, have gone to hemp farmers alone. So, and I personally know many of these people who've gotten the licenses, and I personally know that several of them have preserved farmland. So in New York, what we see is that there's a clear path to preserved farmland growing agricultural cannabis. Of course, everyone's complying with the restrictions in their deed of easement. So, agricultural activity only. We also know that in our neighboring state of Massachusetts, one of our cannabis advisors, who Mike knows well as well, gentleman by the name of Ted Dobson, he got one of the first outdoor cultivation licenses in cannabis in Massachusetts to grow outdoor cannabis. He likewise has preserved farmland. He went through the same thing that we're going through right now in New Jersey, whereby at first they told him that he cannot do it. And he was able to reach a resolution. So what we see is that we believe that the CRC actually does want to help us. They did not have an intention to simply block farmers with preserved farmland. However, I then want to go into the fact of what was the CRC's intent. So the SADC has issued this FAQ, which I believe is extremely misleading. They have this FAQ that says, is cannabis allowed on preserved farmland? And their answer is no, period. It's not. And then they go into their explanation. So this part I found to be extremely misleading, because if you look at the CRC regulations themselves, first of all, the words preserved farmland don't appear anywhere at all. There's only one place where it says something about farmland, and it is to say that land that is valued or assessed as farmland cannot be used to cultivate cannabis. And our understanding from our policy advisors who are speaking to the CRC directly is that the intention here was not to block farms, but rather to make sure people aren't getting a major tax break. So if you are a cannabis producer, then you have to comply with the additional taxes. And the whole purpose of why they are legalizing cannabis in the state is so that the state and the municipality can earn additional taxes. And so as far as we're concerned, we're more than happy to pay whatever taxes they want us to pay. We just want to be able to operate our business. So this really brings into the question what was brought up in the FAQ, which is this question around farmland assessment versus farmland preservation. Now, the FAQ says that because being eligible for farmland assessment is a requirement at the time that you were preserved, that now you have to that they're somehow kind of conflating that you then have to maintain farmland assessment forever. So that made no sense to us. I've had two sets of lawyers pour through our deed of easement restrictions as well as the CRC regulations, and we strongly disagree with this interpretation. I think most farmers with preserved farmland know that there's no requirement to maintain farmland assessment. In fact, every year people have to prove that you did have agricultural activities so that you can continue enjoying that privilege. So if I bought this preserved farmland and I just stopped farming and I just let it all go fallow and eventually become a lawn and just grew grass, I would be allowed to do that. I would just have to pay higher taxes over time. So this is exactly what we saw happen in Massachusetts. When our advisor, Ted, wanted to grow cannabis on preserved farmland, ultimately he had to fight the state, but ultimately what they let him do is simply say, the amount of your land that you're now putting into cannabis cultivation, you can't have farmland tax assessment on that anymore. You now have to pay commercial taxes. And so we're more than happy to do that. We're more than happy to say, here's exactly the amount of our secure cannabis cultivation. We're more than happy to not pay farmland assessment taxes on that. We're more than happy to pay the highest tax rate you can think of, commercial taxes, fine. But the idea that we would be blocked from doing this business at all, I think is a huge disservice to farmers, because to put things into context, the maximum cannabis that the state allows you to grow is 3.4 acres. We have a 250 acre farm. There's 84 acres of agricultural land. So if we grew 3.5 acres of cannabis out of 84 acres of total cannabis, that's 4% of our total agricultural footprint. That means 96% of the rest of our farmland is being used for non-regulated regular crops for which I need absolutely no permissions. And so I just take a step back and think about the opportunity here for farmers, right? Like if farmers had the ability to grow one cash crop, think of what that can do for the rest of your business. You can now start using that money to invest in keeping your farm in the family, upgrading your equipment. Inflation has almost doubled the cost of a lot of the things that the inputs that we need. So I know everybody else is facing the same thing. And so this is really important for all of us to have the right and the access to do this. And the last thing I'll say, and this really covers the main points that I've outlined in my letter, before I'd like to get everyone's feedback, is that farmers have a huge competitive advantage in the cannabis industry. This is a race to the finish line in terms of who can be ready with all of their infrastructure to be able to be compliant with the state regulations. Most of the other players in the cannabis industry need 18 to 24 months to build their fancy warehouses and greenhouses. With the way the supply chain is right now, I'm hearing from people every day that they're not even able to get people to build all of their warehouses and greenhouses. Farmers, conversely, many of us already have most of the infrastructure we need. And what do you really need to cultivate sun-grown cannabis? You need irrigation, you need greenhouses, you need fencing, and then, yeah, you'll need to invest in the security. But many farms I've seen already have greenhouses. They already have the open fields with great soil. Many of them already have fencing for deer fencing and other things that have been put up. So I believe that farmers actually have a major competitive advantage to get ahead of the game. And so this is a time-sensitive issue. So SADC, they can't choose to sit on this for a year, because then we'll have lost our competitive advantage. And then all of a sudden we're competing with some of the biggest corporations in the world. Versus if we were able to get this as a crop in the ground for next year, 2023, it's still October, we still have some time to plan. And this is potentially doable for next year for farmers who are interested and willing to make a move quickly, and and some of whom may have infrastructure. So our farm already has several barns. It has open fields. So all we really need to build is fencing and all of our security stuff. So we feel that, we have a competitive advantage and time is of the essence. So these are basically the points that I've outlined in a letter that I've written to the SADC. Tomorrow is a big day. 9 a.m. there is an in-person SADC meeting. It's also going to be live streamed, but you cannot comment on it over the Zoom. You have to email in your comments. And then depending on what happens, tomorrow at 1 p.m., there's also a Cannabis Regulatory Committee call. And I have registered to make a public comment to that as well. So I'm really hoping to, by the end of the day today, kind of get everybody's feedback and submit a version of my letter to the SADC so that it's on record. I then hope to present it in person tomorrow, just in the regular public comment session. It was too late for me to get on the agenda. And then based on what they tell me, I plan on making a public comment in the afternoon to the CRC. So with that said, thanks for letting me chat with you about this for a few minutes. And I would love to hear anybody's feedback in terms of, has anybody else heard anything new about what's going on in the SADC? And what is the best tone of voice and narrative that we can kind of put forward to get some support from them?
That's a great, thank you, Smrita. That's a great intro to Sherry. And we've got some great questions too, which we will get to. But I just want to give Sherry an opportunity to introduce herself and her operations and her interest in this topic before we get to the discussion. So we'll turn it over to you, Sherry.
Well, thank you for having me speak here tonight, Mike and Devin and NOFA and Smrita. Your presentation is going to be a little bit hard to follow up, but I have some experience with presenting to the State Agriculture Development Committee. I was an employee there for many years before I left to join my then boyfriend and now husband, Jim Kinsel, in managing our fruit and vegetable organic community supported agriculture farm called Honeybrook Organic Farm. We were at one time the largest CSA program in the nation. Our membership was growing until 2016, where we had about 4,000 members. And after 2016, our membership slowly declined with our CSA program. At that time, we were farming a total of 4 farms. 2 were rented in Hopewell and 2 were preserved farms that we own in Chesterfield Township in Burlington County, including the first farm that was preserved in the Farmland Preservation Program. But because our profitability was dwindling, we did have to give up one of the farms that we were farming in Hopewell. And we also had to sell the farm, the first farm preserved in the Farmland Preservation Program in Chesterfield. So fast forward to 2021, and those of you who are organic farmers that are on this call know that the New Jersey Department of Agriculture gave up certifying organic farms in 2021. They gave us very little notice. So my husband Jim and I signed up to be certified through the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New York. And one of the first things I did was to sign up for their winter conference last year. Now, again, keep in mind that we are no longer profitable farmers. So we went from being extremely profitable to now using personal money to float the farm. We are pivoting to being a pick your own organic fruit farm. We also do asparagus. And because of the sessions that I sat in on at the NOFA New York conference last year, we decided to experiment with hemp for the 2022 growing season. And that was in large part because the organic farmers in New York that were on these hemp and cannabis sessions were really excited about growing cannabis, about, as was mentioned earlier in this call, the carbon sequestration benefits, the potential to employ local people for cannabis and or hemp business was very attractive. And also from a personal perspective, growing medicine for people that is not pharmaceutical medicine was very important for me. I had 2 family members that were lost in part due to OxyContin addiction. So any kind of natural plant that's grown organically that can help people with pain management is really important to me. But as an unprofitable farmer, growing a profit, or yeah, growing a profit with plants is really the primary goal. We want to stay in business. So at some point in 2021, I got plugged into what was going on in my township, which is Chesterfield Township in Burlington County, the birthplace of the Farmland Preservation Program, to get back to the recreational cannabis regulations that were promulgated by the CRC. They allowed municipalities to opt in or opt out of allowing cannabis to be grown in their municipality. So initially, Chesterfield Township opted out with really no public dialogue. I was on the call because me and a few other people that are on this Zoom call right now, we were fighting and still are fighting a warehouse development in Chesterfield. And I just saw that cannabis happened to be on the agenda. I asked some questions. The township administrator wasn't even sure if the opting out of the township for cannabis would affect hemp. And I was very concerned that hemp still be allowed. So I stayed tuned in to my municipality's actions on cannabis. And lo and behold, just a few months ago, they reversed course and they promulgated a resolution that now allows certain Chesterfield landowners to grow cannabis. So now we are an opt-in township. However, our township is the only township that I'm aware of in New Jersey that has expressly excluded owners of preserved farmland from growing cannabis. I'm really not happy about that because back on the farm, we have 2 hemp partners now, and we grew a very healthy, very delicious smelling crop of organically grown hemp, and we're curing it now in our barn, and we're really happy with that. I think our farmer would agree that it's one of the highest quality hemp crops that he ever grew. So my feeling is, wow, if we could do this well with sun-grown hemp, we're growing it in high tunnels, and right now we're curing it in a vacant greenhouse because we're not growing vegetables anymore. We don't really have a need for one of the 3 greenhouses that we have now. So like Smrita said, we have a lot of the infrastructure. We have deer fence, we have high tunnels, and the high tunnels were vacant until our partners came together to grow the hemp that we have now. And the greenhouse would have been vacant, but right now it's curing this high value crop that we have. Now back to the SADC. So the SADC actually in 2011 did allow for medicinal cannabis to be grown on a preserved farm. That farmland owner decided not to pursue that use, but that policy was in place. The permission to grow medical cannabis for many years until the CRC was created. Then my understanding is that SADC staff, probably their deputy attorney general, made the determination that the State Agriculture Development Committee no longer has the authority to regulate where cannabis is grown. So that frequently asked questions document that was created by the CRC, but the SADC has it on their website to illustrate that this is why they can't allow cannabis to be grown on preserved farms, because that authority now rests with the CRC. I have no reason to believe that the SADC is opposed to cannabis being grown on preserved farms, especially since they already allowed medical cannabis to be grown on at least one preserved farm that decided not to pursue it. So I believe that with the meetings that are happening tomorrow, first the SADC meeting at 9 o'clock, and then the CRC meeting at 1 o'clock, I believe that it might be helpful for those of us who want to move the ball forward and get a legal determination that we can grow cannabis on preserved farms, is to ask the SADC for a letter of support at tomorrow's meeting. Being that this issue isn't on the agenda, they in all likelihood will not make a determination on it. So I plan on speaking during the public comments in support of cannabis being allowed to grow on preserved farms, especially for those of us who are conventional or conventional or organic vegetable and fruit growers. Our profitability has really declined because of imports into our country of fruits and vegetables from other countries. We're hurting. A lot of us have read the news of both organic and conventional farms losing profitability. This is a problem. Cannabis can be the answer. I think the SADC might be an ally as long as we approach them with respect. And, you know, they do deserve respect. They were fairly progressive when they decided to allow medical cannabis. I think that we are merely asking the CRC to revisit their frequently asked questions, and in light of the fact that you can still be a preserved farm and not have farmland assessment, that I think that is maybe something that they don't know and would help them maybe revise their determination on that perspective. In fact, one of the administrators of the farmland preservation program in one of the counties that has a farmland preservation program, he said that every year, each preserved farm has to be inspected to make sure that they're still in compliance with the restrictions that come along with having a preserved farm. He said that they never even ask to see the farm owner's farmland assessment paperwork. So I do believe it's part of the application process that when you are the original owner and you're applying to have your farm preserved, you have to show that you are receiving farmland assessment taxes. It's no requirement after you're in the program to keep that farmland assessment. So I think that their reliance on a farmland assessment tax status is a little weak, and they might agree with us if we ask them in a way that is respectful. And I also plan on being at the CRC meeting to ask them to revisit their policy tomorrow. And I welcome any of your questions. And you could also reach out to me through my website, chesterfieldorchards.com. If you have any questions when you think about this presentation in the future. I'd like to get as many of you as possible on board with this advocacy issue. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Thank you both, Sherry and Smrita, for sharing your stories and, you know, in a sense, taking a risk, really talking about a complicated subject matter. And we've got a couple questions that I think we can address and we should address. One specifically is related to the township being in support of you know, whether the township allows cannabis cultivation. And I want to just maybe give both Smrita and Sherry a chance to talk about the process that an applicant needs to go through to address their specific situation according to the law. So the ordinance of the township may allow something, but not allow something else. And the practice, as I understand it, is allowed for an applicant to ask for a variance to the ordinance to provide for the individual to do something that the town actually doesn't have a problem with, but just doesn't have a, an easy way to do it. Can you, Smrita, maybe to start with you, can you talk a little bit about the process that you've engaged in talking to the town about adapting their regulations to allow you to pursue your venture?
Sure, absolutely. And at this point, I've spoken to several different towns because, as I mentioned, I've been looking for farmland for quite a while. So the first step is to really figure out what your town has already said in terms of an ordinance, and to just to rewind back to last year. The state of New Jersey had given municipalities until the end of August 2021 to either opt in or opt out. This put towns in a very tough position because the regulations didn't actually come out until August 19th. So many towns simply opted out just to be on the safe side because they were like, you know what, there's no rules out. Let's just opt out to make sure. So I kind of understand why they did that. I happen to be in a town, which is Frelinghuysen Township in Warren County, that they were mavericks. They, even though there was no regulations, they opted into cannabis, but they only said yes to cannabis in the industrial zone. So there was nothing allowed in the ordinance that would allow farmland. So when I first saw this property and I saw that they had an ordinance that was even remotely allowing cannabis, I felt like I wanted to take a risk. So because they've allowed cannabis, but not in my zone, I'm in the agricultural zone, obviously with a farm. I have to apply for a land use variance. So I have applied to my my land use board. We had our first public town hearing on October 3rd, and it actually was extremely favorable. We felt that the land use board was actually on our side. But as I mentioned before, there was a substantial amount of education that was required. So I was under oath. I was testifying for over 3 hours. And I really started with a very educational background of how, there's a misnomer out there. There's the misconception out there that cannabis has to be grown in warehouses, but this is not true. And I talked a lot about the opportunity for farmers. And because we have an agricultural community, I felt like that that dialogue was very well received. And they really appreciated that we have a much broader regenerative business model that's well diversified. So our town liked the fact that I was saying, we're not just cannabis growers. We're farmers. We're going to be growing a lot of different things. We're medicine makers. We're herbalists. So this is not just a cannabis company. We're not just doing that recreational cannabis. We have this entire farming business. So that resonated with them a lot. That said, there's nothing easy about this process for farmers. This process has cost me a tremendous amount of money. I've probably spent at least $75,000 already, just in terms of the township fees, which alone were like $15,000 just for the land use board professionals. I then was required to have my own lawyer. We had to have engineers and planners sign off on one of our plans and also come in and testify. So there's nothing easy about this or cheap. So that's definitely something that's tough for small farmers. But yeah, so that's pretty much the process I'm going through right now, which is a lot of triangulation. So after that whole process, what I'm working towards and what you need is a resolution letter from the township. But once I get my use variance, I believe that should be fairly easy to get. But some of us are going to have to fight for the whole outdoor thing in our respective towns.
Sherry, I've got a follow-up, but Sherry, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, being that, well, I should back up a little bit. The one township that we still rent in is Hopewell Township in Mercer County. Hopewell Township, also like Frelinghuysen, was one of the early adopters for opt-in, and they do allow one grower license. And the last time I checked, nobody had taken that license. So I'm in this interesting position where I could probably pursue growing cannabis on the farm that I rent. But the farm that I own, which is a preserved farm, is in Chesterfield Township, which decided to specifically exclude preserved farmland owners from growing cannabis. I think that the reason why they did that is they are very interested in enriching the landowners that still own farmland that's not preserved, which is crazy, right? When you have this type of ordinance on the books, you're actually it's disincentivizing the people who still have developable farmland from going into the farmland preservation program. My husband Jim and I were talking about, like, wow, if the CRC changes its policy and allows cannabis to be grown on preserved farmland, we still have a township that's not allowing it. Does the state regulatory body preempt the ordinance that the township promulgated? Because even though New Jersey is known as a home rule state, municipalities only get the powers that they have through the state. So it's a legal question, and we can't afford to lawyer up to do that fight. So other farmland owners of preserve farms in Chesterfield might have to do that, or we might have to approach like a nonprofit lawyer group to help us with that. But I think that for us, the first step towards being allowed to grow cannabis is having the interpretation changed by the CRC, and then we would have to figure out what we're doing at our municipal level.
So yeah, that's very interesting, Sherry. And the one thing I'll add there is that every time I speak to representatives of the CRC, they don't feel like they do need to change their policy, because their position is, we didn't say anything about preserved farmland. That word preserved does not show up even a single time in the entire regulation. All it says is farmland assessment, and they're going to keep that. They're never going to say that you can pay farmland taxes and grow cannabis. And I think we should accept that. We should go in saying we're happy to pay the taxes. It's just about the farmland preservation thing. So I think that's where we are today. Of every time I have to try to have these conversations, it just goes nowhere, because each side is blaming the other, and each side thinks that they are allowing it. And so I think that's what would be really great, to at least start the conversation tomorrow, since we have meetings at both. And I think the more farmers we can get to kind of echo that opinion, the stronger our case becomes, so that they can realize, like, you're actually banning an entire sector of farms. And Sherry, I really hope your township changes that ordinance, and maybe you can just go and start complaining for free at some of their town meetings to say, what's going on here.
Yeah, that was the follow-up that I wanted, and probably in the time we have remaining, we could focus on this. Like, it's part of how do you address when there is a prohibition or there is a misconception that then becomes published, and people assume that they know what they're talking about, and they assume they can say no based on this, published statement. How do you actually correct that? Because I think what we've seen here is this misconception about the significance of the CRC rules, talking about, that a farm producing cannabis needs to be taxed appropriately. And so to be sure that a farm producing cannabis is taxed, the CRC has said it cannot receive a tax abatement. It cannot receive farmland assessment. That's all. And what we're seeing is then both the SADC and the CRC have published a statement that sort of ties that into its statement of whether growing cannabis is allowed. And this, I think, is the misconception and the misrepresentation that we hope to address by speaking about the significance of farmers wanting to be able to pursue this crop, and the significance of preserved farms being, an investment that our state has already made into protecting farmland, which is all about protecting farmers. And we're at a point now where we need real solid thinking to go into play here to get rid of the prohibitions and build support. So I guess I just wanted to focus on the fact that right now, the biggest problem we're facing is we have FAQs, frequently asked questions, statements prepared and presented by both the CRC and the SADC that are really kind of misrepresentations of what the topic is. And I've found this in my own situation in our township, where our town opted in and they have an ordinance that says unlimited cultivation centers. But then I think because they did a quick read of no farmland preservation allowed, no farmland assessment allowed, they easily made the jump to say, you can't grow it on a farm. And that's not accurate. And it has to be confronted. And we're trying to figure out how to confront it effectively with respect for the organizations that are trying to promote agriculture.
Mike, what occurred to me when I was planning to speak this morning, last night, is that we do have a sympathetic senator in Senator Stanfield. We might want to get together and meet with her to see if she would be interested in proposing some legislation that would take the ambiguity out of this issue, where it would expressly state that maybe we want to go as far as to say all owners of farmland, preserved or non-preserved, because there's also all kinds of entities that are preserving farms in New Jersey. It's not just the State Agriculture Development Committee. There's a lot of nonprofits that are involved. And honestly, I'm not even sure where the nonprofits stand on cannabis growing on their own farms. The New Jersey Conservation Foundation, the Watershed Association, the Delaware and Raritan Land Trust. So that might be a long-term solution, is to try to help write and get a sponsor for legislation that would disambiguate.
Yeah, so we have a real problem with the ambiguity of how to interpret no farmland assessed properties. And I think we feel all really strongly that it seems pretty straightforward, that the Cannabis Regulatory Commission wants anybody growing cannabis to pay all the taxes they can, basically, period. And that's really the issue. And that's not an issue that any cannabis farmer that we can think of has a problem with. Although I would have to say that in New Jersey, we'd like to support agriculture. And so it actually seems like a really good opportunity to talk about how we can reduce taxes on farms and on farmers to try to support them. But that's down the road. We're not even there yet. Michael brought up, let's see, have you found it difficult to get a letter of support from the township? That being one of the major obstacles for smaller farmers and businesses. He also brought up the issue of getting folks into this business that maybe don't have access to farmland, can't buy farmland, don't have farmland, but would get into it, with being able to grow, purchase a structure or something like that, or warehouse, and be able to produce it. And I think that's another thing, is we're not necessarily saying that we're against people who want to pursue it growing indoors. It's really the function that what we're talking about is that we want farmers to be able to benefit from this crop going forward.
One thing I'll add on that, Mike, very quickly, is so for farmers who don't have access to farmland, there's one interesting stipulation in the CRC regulations. We've not seen this actually been done yet because, even us farmers many of us are just still waiting. But theoretically, if you got a micro business license, you could co-locate your cultivation with another farm that has a class 1 cultivation license. So for example, if we were able to get our business operating, then theoretically we would be allowed to have other micro business license holders also locate their grows within our license structure. So for small farmers, the biggest obstacles I see are, first of all, just getting through the whole licensing process because it's expensive, and then paying for any additional infrastructure that you may need, which is really around security. So I think it's really early to talk about that, since like we don't even have farmers with the class 1. But I think this is something that as NOFA, as a community, we should be monitoring over the next year or so and see, you know, are any farmers actually getting these class 1 licenses? And if so, then perhaps over time there's an opportunity for smaller farmers to apply for a micro business license, which is not expensive. I think it's like $200 to pay the application fee, and then see if there's partnerships that we can try to curate. But again, pretty early still.
In the chat, there was a question, does the New Jersey Farm Bureau is the New Jersey Farm Bureau taking a position? And the answer was, there's really just no answer, no direction from them. And this is one of the biggest concerns, and why we wanted to bring this up to the public, is that our traditional advocates for agriculture are basically silent here. So we are not finding any support from the organizations and entities that claim to be supporting agriculture. In a lot of ways, their silence is really a detriment to farmers and to farming. So the question is, how do we get rid of this misconception and misrepresentation of the significance, so that farmers can move forward and can benefit from the opportunities? There was a specific question, Smrita, about the micro businesses. Would they have to be from adjoining townships?
Yes, either adjoining townships or a neighboring, either the same township or one that shares a border.
Michael, I know we've talked about this subject before. Do you want to chime in with your own sort of experience looking into the subject? I know that you were considering, live in an urban area, and you were considering this opportunity. Do you want to unmute and chime in with your experience?
Yes, hello everybody. Yeah, I mean, I'm in Bergen County, so I'm in, it's not farmland. There's no farmland at all in my area, but I have been approaching the municipality, and they don't allow any cultivation. But I mean, myself as a legacy grower, I mean, I have experience in like unregulated markets growing, and I mean, I just believe it's unfair how they're not allowing like the farms. I mean, I think that should be really the first people that should be allowed to grow the cannabis, whether it's indoors or outdoors. But yeah, it's just been difficult just approaching, just getting letters of support, because I think one of the biggest things is, like I've been hearing resonate, is like education. I think like the municipalities need to be educated on the benefits that the hemp cannabis is going to have to the soil. I mean, that's like one of the biggest ones, is they do care about agriculture, especially if it is an agriculture or a farm town, you know. So I mean, I think that's like one of the big things that I've been seeing for me, going to a lot of conventions and seminars, is that we need to educate the municipalities. I'm not really good at advocating, but I think that's one of the biggest things. Just like there's a lot of reports just backing it up with science on what the phytoremediation, how it pulls up heavy metals from the soil, how it aerates the soil. How the root system, it's a good weed suppressant, so you don't need any pesticides, etc. You know, I mean, I guess just approaching with science. That's like the big thing. And it's something that they could see.
Yeah,
I mean, that's my
I think that's a good a good thing for us to be focused on here at the end, is just the significant reality that the cannabis plant is happy growing outdoors. The environment, the ecology is happy to have the cannabis plant there. There's everything that indicates that this is a great opportunity for agriculture. New Jersey also is really seems to be moving towards a smaller and smaller farm model. You know, so small scale producers are often the ones that are supplying our local markets and supplementing the foods in local health food stores. So there's every reason to be supporting small scale operations in New Jersey to produce small amounts of valuable product in sustainable, ecological ways. So it's a very exciting time. It's a very exciting opportunity. And we're really grateful for all of your attention and very grateful for our guests for telling their stories and sharing their perspective. I'll see you both at the SADC meeting tomorrow and probably the following month and going forward until we can get some solid progress here. And just give you guys the last word if you have anything you want to add before we wrap up.
Well, I'll just say thank you so much. I feel so grateful for the support of this community. We're all in this together, and I think that this could be something absolutely transformative for many different farmers who are looking for another way to regain profitability. And so to anyone who is able to come in person tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I'll certainly be there along with Mike and Sherry. If not, if you could consider sending in a written comment, that's also possible. I think it would be very much appreciated. And same thing with the CRC call, which is at 1 p.m. tomorrow. That's also public. The live stream is available for that. I won't be able to be there in person tomorrow for that, but I have already registered for a public comment. And it's the same thing there. You can register for a public comment, which you can dial into, and you can also email them any comments. So any momentum we're able to generate from the farming community would be much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I also echo everything that Smrita said. I really encourage everybody to get involved with this advocacy initiative. We all bring our own unique gifts to this challenge, and I think we are a unique community, and we really need to have our voices heard. And I thank you again for your time. I know for those of you that are farmers, it's always hard to find time for these sessions, but you know, I know that you're all committed to this topic too, or you wouldn't be here. So thank you again. I look forward to hopefully seeing you at the meetings or to seeing you at the winter conference in January.
Thanks, Sherry, for the plug for the NOFA New Jersey annual winter conference, which will be this last Saturday in January. It's going to be a great event. It's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of people to see and interact with. And Devin's put some links in the chat for how to get to these, comment periods. But also you can just go to the State Agricultural Development Committee website and look for links to how to participate in meetings. Also, the CRC is the Cannabis Regulatory Commission. I'm sure you can find a link from their website to how to participate. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you out there.